Hello, and welcome to A Renewed Life Global. Discover secrets to heal emotional wounds, set boundaries, and move forward. I am your host, Dr. Beverly Carter. The title of today's interview is Embracing Vulnerability and Self-Reflection to Unpack Shame and Discover Empowerment. And today we welcome Lauren Presutti. Lauren is the founder of River Oak Psychology. She's a licensed psychotherapist, disability activist, speaker, educator, and community leader. Diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at age 2, Lauren has been using a power wheelchair since she was 5 years old. Her firsthand experiences revealed that traditional mental health professionals rarely have a lifetime of knowledge and experience to work effectively and truly connect deeply with those affected by medical conditions, chronic illnesses, and disabilities. This inspired Lauren to become a mental health therapist, specializing in this area. But she also developed herself as a clinician, passionate about working with those of all backgrounds and identities. Lauren has worked extensively with people of all ages in educational settings, public agencies, and nonprofits, combining her multidisciplinary experience in sociology, education, and social work. Lauren operates as a professional grounded in the theories of self-development and empowerment. And we welcome you, Lauren, to the platform.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's really an honor. I love the work that you do, and I'm so privileged to be able to talk with you today about trauma and healing.
Well, I can promise you that it's us. We're the one who are privileged and honored to have you and to
Thank
learn from
you.
you. So we thank you for being here. You ready to jump
Absolutely.
right in?
Absolutely.
All right. So would you mind, I just read your extraordinary bio. Will you share more about yourself? Is there anything about yourself that you feel we need to know and your work and your
Ab-
passion for this work? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that it's really important for people to know a little bit about my background because it really truly informs how I operate today and the lens through which I work as a professional. So, like you mentioned, I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy at age 2, which is something I was born with, and I started using my first wheelchair at age 5. However, I never really saw myself as a minority or a person with a disability. I knew that I was using a wheelchair, but I didn't have any idea about things like oppression or stigmas or stereotypes. I truly felt like I was the exact same person as everyone else. And I didn't really have a reason growing up in childhood to feel sort of ashamed or like I was really experiencing trauma because it was my normal. And I was also really fortunate to live in a small town bubble. So maybe that led into those feelings that I had growing up of feeling normal and empowered. However, when I went to college, my world really changed because I went a few hours away from my small town bubble. And that was the first time that I started having awareness of oppression. I started noticing that people with disabilities, medical conditions, or chronic illnesses truly have barriers. I faced so many barriers when I wanted to go to college. I knew that I was intelligent enough to go to college and capable of having a great career, but just the hoops that I had to jump through to find accessible housing, to access people that could help me with my caregiving and activities of daily living. I started also noticing barriers to employment for people with disabilities. And I just started really reflecting and raising my consciousness of the systems and structures that the historic world was designed by. And this truly also made me aware of other minority groups. I realized that disability is not the only group that has some of this oppression and barriers and that perhaps go through a great deal of trauma. It increased my knowledge of people of color, people of LGBT representation or identity, those with religious minority identities, those that have varying levels of socioeconomic status. I really became fascinated with how people navigate life challenges, how people get through these awful and difficult challenges that they do not deserve to have. They do not deserve oppression. They did not sign up for that. They did not do anything wrong in their authentic self. And yet they often face interpersonal trauma as well as trauma relating to all different things in their life, whether it be sexual trauma. We know that some minority groups are more vulnerable to that type of trauma, especially those that may identify as transgender or other types of minority sexual identities. And so I saw the connection between minority identity and the subsequent trauma that they may be exposed to. And that's what led me to be a therapist, because I want people to feel empowered. I truly don't want people to feel like they're ever alone. Life is hard enough.
Oh
We
my
don't
goodness.
we don't have to go through it alone. And I don't think that we can truly live a life of freedom and fulfillment if we have this underlying trauma and this underlying shame, really shame, and this underlying feeling of being different that is holding us back, that is imprisoning us to our own beliefs or shame or biases. And I love the work that I do. I think we all have trauma,
Yes.
mild or major, whether you identify as a minority or not. There is likely some trauma in your life. I think, we always think of trauma as a major car accident or something horrific or something, totally catastrophic. But trauma is trauma, and your trauma is valid, whether you have felt abandoned by a parent or a best friend, or have struggled with your school experiences and have felt shame for that. It doesn't matter the level of trauma, it
Mm.
still impacts us in really profound ways.
It really does. Thank you so much for saying all that you did. Oh my God, it's I just love the fact that you grew up in a bubble, that you're protected from all of this
Yeah.
stuff
I
that we
think
have
so
to.
many of us
Yeah,
do sometimes.
yeah,
We,
yeah. Not enough though. Not enough of us, I tell you.
oh gosh, certainly,
Not
yes.
enough. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, yeah. So from your perspective, how does a person with trauma even begin their healing journey? And, how do they connect with this empowerment or self
Yeah.
empowerment?
Well, it is definitely a process. And I want to say that first and foremost, because we don't need to put the pressure or the expectation on ourselves to heal our trauma overnight or in a couple weeks of therapy. I think healing from trauma is ongoing. And to answer your question of how do we get started, I think we truly need to be vulnerable with ourselves. We have to be willing to confront that internal pain, which is one of the hardest things in life to do. We don't want to feel pain. We don't want to acknowledge it. We don't want to talk about it. And that's why those of us that are privileged to maybe remain in a small bubble or a small town sometimes really struggle with expanding their worldview because it exposes them to
Yes.
a lot of pain. And it's the same process in therapy or on anybody's journey to self discovery, whether they're doing it independently through their own healing or with a therapist. We have to be willing to confront it. We have to be willing to honor our pain, to truly honor it. And that means really assessing our defense mechanisms. Are there other things that we have as patterns that maybe deflect our pain or deny our pain? Are there behaviors or styles of communication that we have that are trauma responses that maybe we don't even identify as being trauma responses? Maybe those behaviors are so automatic to us or so ingrained in our behavior that we may not even be able to identify it. So, confronting that pain, verbalizing those things, deeply reflecting on how our past is impacting our present personality, behaviors, communication, thoughts, feelings, and ideas. I think it's always a process, but confronting it is that very first step. That's what we have to do in order to begin the journey of muddling through it.
Wow. Yeah. That is so key, isn't it? Acknowledging, and really drilling down into that experience.
It takes a great deal of courage and bravery. And I am so inspired by the strength of my clients and those who I know in my own personal life who have done that work. I mean,
Yeah,
that takes a lot of effort. And I think anyone listening that is going through that process of being willing to confront it and sit with that pain is really brave, and they should be giving themselves a lot of credit.
absolutely, absolutely. And just as a reminder, and I love what you said earlier, that this is a walk that you don't have to take alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's just a place to start, but you don't have to take that journey by
No,
yourself.
it's okay to ask for help. I always tell people that is one thing that will never be taken away from you. You may go through problems in life, challenges, you may have bad things happen to you. Unfortunately, that's the way that our lives sometimes are. We can't escape the unpredictable nature of experiencing a challenge or having something unfortunate happen. I wish that we could. I wish that we could, protect ourselves all the time and only experience joy and laughter and positivity. But I think the reality is that sometimes we have to understand and confront that life is really hard. But no matter what
Yeah,
happens to you, no matter
yeah,
what experience you have, whatever hurts you, whatever challenge you face, you will never lose the ability to ask for help. You will always be
that's
able to
right.
ask for help through that challenge, whatever it is.
Well said. And part of the reason I love that you said it, that you said that, we haven't lost the ability to ask for help. We never lose that. Is because I think sometimes when we look at our circumstances and we're trying to think positive and, focus on somebody else's positive, we get stuck in a cycle that's whispering all these negative things in our ear. So what about those people who have strong negative self-talk? What would you
Yes,
recommend? Yeah.
completely. Negative self talk is one of the really big hurdles to recovering from trauma. Those of us with trauma really sometimes have internalized negative self talk, and that's a barrier to freedom. So, what I really recommend is confronting those thoughts, identifying those thoughts, being able to externalize those thoughts a little bit. So, instead of saying to myself, I'm a failure. Oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I must be a failure. Instead of saying that, it's better to say and healthier to say, I'm having a thought that I might be a failure. I'm having an automatic negative thought that is really my anxiety and depression talking. It's an automatic thought, but I don't have to believe that thought. I don't have to entertain that thought. I don't even have to feed into that thought. I don't have to internalize it. That is a thought. We all have thoughts. It is not a guaranteed truth. We don't have to believe our thoughts. And really, when we look at analyzing thoughts and facts and opinions and data, we have to look at the evidence. So sometimes it's really helpful for clients and those in general, anywhere in their life or healing process, to extract the thought from their mind, maybe write it on a piece of paper, and think about what is the evidence that this thought is true and what is the evidence that this thought is false. And by really looking at the rationality of that thought, sometimes we can stop ourselves and say, oh, maybe that's not true. Maybe I just had that thought, but maybe that's not true. For example, for those of us that may struggle with interpersonal connections and relationships, sometimes feeling rejected is really hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes not receiving a response from a text message or an email, or having someone cancel plans on us, or having them maybe behave or act in a way that makes us feel really rejected. We might say, oh my goodness, they must hate me. They must not care about me anymore. They don't like me. I'm not worthy of feeling cared for. And by going through that thought process of, well, is that true? Or is it possible that maybe they had a really busy day and forgot to respond? What other possibilities might there be other than they just don't care about us anymore? Could there be another explanation? So I work with a lot of clients that are working to extract their thoughts, check their thoughts, and then reframe them. And the reframing part is the final piece where we can say, okay, I'm having this thought. I've sort of rationalized myself with that thought to realize that there may be a better or more healthier or more useful way of looking at this situation. And now I'm going to reframe it. I'm going to practice saying, or at least mentally thinking, in a
Yeah.
different way that might be more healthy and more useful to me,
Hmm.
and in a way that will help me feel better. Because that's the goal, is
Right.
to understand that those thoughts are feeding into worsening symptoms in that very moment of feeling anxious, feeling more depressed. That's the core principle of cognitive behavioral therapy. Our thoughts feed into our feelings, and our feelings feed back into our thoughts and behaviors, and it's all a cycle. So when
Yeah.
we can identify it and be okay with reframing it, it really helps us feel better in most
Absolutely.
cases. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, it really does. And I thank you for taking the time to walk us through that. Because it's true, sometimes it does take a moment to get to, to the reality of what we're thinking, right? Just to find a better way to think
Exactly.
those thoughts.
And that
Yeah.
takes so much practice. I always tell people, we don't need to be perfect at that,
Yeah.
but by practicing it over time, repeatedly, we are truly rewiring our brain so
Yeah.
that those automatic negative thoughts become less and less frequent. I
Yeah.
always encourage people to have positive affirmations about themselves,
Yeah.
maybe on a sticky note on their bathroom mirror, or, journaling. Journaling is so healing. It's a great way to really list out and practice a narrative that puts you in a positive light, that really celebrates your
Absolutely.
strengths, that can help
Absolutely. Yeah.
avoid some of that automatic negative thinking as well.
I love it. That's beautiful. So, what thoughts do you have about those people who are living in the past and really focusing on, maybe unmet needs from childhood?
Yes, so common.
Yeah.
People with trauma, in a lot of ways, probably did not have all of their needs met growing up because of that trauma. Or perhaps their trauma is related to parents that abused or neglected them in some way, or
Yes.
maybe abandoned them in some way, or maybe their parents did the best they could, but they still didn't really provide the emotional support that that individual really needed growing up. So, what I like to do is talk with my clients about the process of reparenting. Re-
Mm.
Reparenting is this concept that essentially positions the idea that we can reparent ourselves. We can heal our inner child because that inner child has not gone away. I was actually just speaking with someone recently about this concept, and she had felt like her inner child was still very much alive every single day. She was an adult, but that inner child, she didn't go anywhere. That inner child is the 5-year-old version of herself, the
Yeah.
10-year-old version of herself. And that version of herself is not gone because it still is hurting her every day. It's still impacting the way that she feels and the way that she acts. And we were talking about this concept of reparenting. And I said to her, what would you say to yourself if you could go back? And let's say that, you're in that scene where you're struggling as a child or you're feeling hurt and the adult version of you was there. How would you nurture her? How would you care for her? What would you say to her? And sometimes clients will say, I would tell her that it gets better. I would tell her that it's going to be okay. I would tell her that I love her. I would tell her that she's safe and her feelings matter and that she's a good person or a good child. And by really guiding clients through that process of What would you do to nurture the younger version of yourself? What
Yeah.
does that younger version need? What does she need to hear? What does he need to hear? What do they need to hear? What do they need? That can help bring awareness that you maybe did not get the parenting and the nurturing that you needed, and we can't go back in time figuratively or, legitimately, but we can do the parenting now. We can have parenting now. I don't care how old you are.
Sure.
If you need parenting, if you need nurturing,
Yeah.
you can do that with yourself. That's very empowering to parent
Yes.
yourself. But also, you don't have to do it alone. You can reach out for help. You can
Absolutely.
have nurturing sources that will help you through that process. It is a self-healing mentality.
Mm.
The idea that we are now adults, we are people, we are stronger than what we may believe, and we can heal ourselves by giving ourselves the things that our inner child really needs. We can give ourselves those things, and we can talk to ourselves in nurturing ways, and we can identify our unmet needs and fill those needs. Do we need a stronger
Yeah.
support system? Do
Yeah.
we need more people that we can call when we're feeling upset? What do we need? What do we need to feel nurtured and protected?
Wow. Yeah, that is so powerful, and I am so grateful that you really went into that a bit. So powerful, the inner child
Oh,
work. Yes.
thank you. And
Wow.
there's so much more to say on all of these subjects, and if we had
I know.
all day, we could certainly go
I
into
know.
more. But
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have these types of conversations, even just to plant the seed in anyone listening, in the minds of
Absolutely.
anyone listening. These are truly remarkable things that we're talking about here.
They really are. They really and truly are. And they are gifts that they can access. They're accessible. You know, they can do this. They can be guided through it. So,
Mhm.
what do you think about? I mean, you know, it's so interesting. I'm thinking about a few things. You know, one that comes to mind is um, work with children. You know, children who are really going through it. I know we talked about going back to heal our own inner child, and but any ideas or recommendations? I know you mentioned CBT also, which is a wonderful therapy for children who are trying to survive a difficult childhood, a difficult parent, a destructive parent, or a toxic parent.
Yes, I think it is so important for them to have an outlet. They really need to have teachers or mentors or to become involved in something like a school club or Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. They
Mm-hmm.
really need positive role models, especially if their home life is not a positive, healthy example.
Right.
That's my greatest fear for kids today is
Yeah.
that they're not witnessing healthy communication or
Yeah.
healthy conflict resolution. They're not always, certainly, there are some families doing a wonderful job, but really for these kids that are in home environments where
Yeah.
the parents may be struggling with their mental health, they
Yeah.
may be struggling to make ends meet. I mean, these kids that are truly going through trauma or
Yeah.
catastrophes or losses, they need the social support more than anything else.
Truly.
They truly need to feel cared for and like they are feeling heard and feeling authentic and feeling like they can express themselves
Sure.
to talk about that. I love summer camps that are for children that have lost a parent, or summer camps or other types of extracurricular programs for kids that are maybe going through a major chronic illness or that has a sibling going through a major illness, or maybe other programs that help children deal with other types of major life problems. Those are the
Yeah.
programming and the events and the types of things that can be really healing for children. So,
Yeah.
whether it's a
Yeah.
school club or, a play group program or a structured program like a summer camp or other types
Yeah.
of programming by therapists, that's really what I would encourage parents and guardians to get
Oh,
their
that's
kids
awesome.
involved in. They need to have spaces where those kids can express what they feel
Yeah.
without fear of judgment, without fear of consequences. That's so important for them to grow up and to continue feeling like they can express themselves.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. I thank you for offering that. You've said so much in this, in this interview, and I think I just want to um, go back a little bit and ask you to highlight some of the key components that you've discussed, in terms of healing. So, from your perspective, what action steps can be taken to alleviate the burden of trauma and heal emotional wounds?
Definitely. I would say confronting the pain, being willing to heal. We have to be willing to heal and really work on some of our motivation to heal as a starting point.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out and reflect on, is something holding me back from healing? Is it fear? Am I afraid of the discomfort that may come up? What are some other barriers in my healing process? Am I ready to confront it? And then when we are ready, the next step would be to ask for help or to at least gather some resources and information and possibly journaling prompts or
Hmm.
books or other resources that you can set aside time, whether weekly or daily, whatever works best for you, to
Hmm.
process these things. Notice your negative self talk, notice what you're feeling, and practice very good self care. Self care is a whole nother subject to talk about, but for now, I'll just say that this process is exhausting.
Yeah.
Healing from trauma, healing from emotional wounds, healing from pain of any kind is mentally draining.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves through this process. It may mean that we cut back on some of the normal social demands or responsibilities that we have as we're doing this work. Or it may mean that we integrate more time just for us in each day so that
Yeah.
we can have breaks from the emotional work and have some relief as well. So,
Absolutely.
noticing your self care is hugely important.
That's so important. I tell you all of what you said. I have been known to say that into every life a little trauma will fall. Sometimes it's a big trauma, sometimes it's a small
Mhm.
trauma, but nonetheless, we're all working.
It's all valid. We are all working through it. That is the basis of the human condition to have pain at some point in life. And we have to be willing to be vulnerable to work through it and to be committed to our healing process.
That's right. Absolutely. So, let's talk about boundaries for a moment.
Mhm.
How do we learn to set boundaries after experiencing a trauma in order to heal?
Mhm. Boundaries are critical. We have to know what our needs are first and foremost. If we are engaging in something or having a relationship with someone or fulfilling some type of social demand that is burning us out, that's not good for our healing process. That's not good for our development and our mental health. So we have to first identify what those things are that are feeling a bit too triggering or that are exhausting
Right.
us a bit too much for it to even be productive. And we have to set those limits, which means we might have to learn how to say no to something. We might
Okay.
have to learn to prioritize our own care and time and needs a little bit. We might have to be willing to perhaps disappoint someone if we have to remove ourselves from a friendship, relationship,
Yes.
work schedule, or other type of social demand. We may have to refrain for a short time from the things that we normally do because we have to set those boundaries if it's good for us, if it's good for our process. Maybe
Right.
it means that we don't return to the scene of a car accident right now or
Hmm.
the environment where we lost a person or the place that which we were abused. That is okay. We can set boundaries in terms of locations, places, people, memories if we are not ready And if that exposure is going to hurt us more than help us right now, then setting boundaries is absolutely critical. We can't rush the process,
Not
and
at all.
we have to have those boundaries so that we can carefully and thoughtfully heal rather than continue exposing ourselves to things that are hurting us more than helping us.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Um, I love the whole idea of freedom. I love the fact that you referenced it earlier on. That excites me because a lot of people don't think that freedom from emotional traumas and oppression is possible. But do you believe that it is? And if you do, for you, what would it look like? How
Yeah.
do we move forward?
Yes, I definitely believe that it is possible. It may not seem possible when we're in the midst of true pain and agony, and that's okay. But we have to show up and remember that by showing up to that healing process, we are getting closer to freedom, and it is possible. And if I have a client that says, I just don't think it's possible to recover, I just don't think that, freedom is going to be there for me, I say, that's okay. I'm going to believe it for you. I'm going to
Right.
carry that. I'm going
That's
to have the belief because I know that it's possible. And it's okay that you don't right now, but you will. You will believe it's possible in time because every time that we work through this process, you are going to get closer to that. And it is going to be worth it. It is absolutely going to be worth it. We all deserve freedom.
yes, we
And to
do.
answer your question of what does freedom really look like, I believe that freedom means that we are honoring our authentic self. We are living exactly as we want to live without fear, without judgment of any consequences. We are showing up in the world in the way that we feel best. We are engaging in the life activities, relationships, events, and experiences that feed our soul, that fuel us without fear of judgment, without fear that our past experiences are imprisoning us or that we are chained to those past experiences. When we are free, when we have freedom, it means that we recognize our past, we acknowledge our past, but we are not defined by our past, and we will
That's right.
not let our past dictate the freedom and the autonomy and the empowerment and fulfillment that is possible for the rest of our lives. Don't waste another second of your life feeling chained to your past. I don't care how old you are. If you're 80 years old and you have trauma, go through that process because the rest of your entire life, however long that may be, is worth it. You don't deserve to live in that pain for
Nope.
another second. And
Mm-mm.
I just want people to know that it's never too late. It doesn't matter how old you are or where you are in your life. If there is any trauma from childhood or your young adulthood or midlife, it doesn't matter where the trauma came from. You can free yourself from it. It will be a part of your story, right? It'll always be something that is a part of your story, but you don't have to be defined by it and it doesn't have to dictate the rest of your chapter and story.
That's right. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that. So
Of
powerful.
course.
My goodness. Wow.
Oh, I'm so happy to have been able to talk about this. I truly can't wait to watch the other interviews in this online
Oh,
summit.
yes.
And we are just really building a collective of
Absolutely.
restoring hope and ideas about hope here. It's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes. And prayerfully releasing people from the burden of those traumatic experiences so they can do what they're here to do and not get trapped. Yes.
Absolutely.
So I know that you have a special gift for everyone. Do you want to share that?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So, my free gift for all of our audience here is a fully prepared PDF of tons of information. So, I have compiled several pages of self help resources, tips. I have lots of information about assessing for your basic needs because we all have to attend to our basic needs before we dive into the healing process. So, meeting your basic needs and then also assessing for what self care looks like to you. I personally have my top 30 favorite coping skills
Wow.
because we we must have good coping skills. And so often we are not really even sure of what our coping skills are,
Yeah.
or there are more coping skills that we might benefit from. So I have shared my top 30 favorite ones, and I have
Nice.
also included several pages on how to set goals so that when you are healing from this process, you can look at some of your future goals and use that as motivation for healing. You know, what do you want to do in the rest of your life? So I have some tips on setting goals and also creating goals and how to use support systems for helping in your process, plus 50 journal prompts that you can use to journal. And those prompts are categorized by different subjects. So you'll be able to go through all of those and spend some time journaling on those things. So it's a very full packet, and all of my contact information is also included there.
Beautiful.
So you can reach out to me with any questions. If you are interested in services, you can reach out to me. I also have my website in the packet along with, you know, other details. So very, very exciting.
Definitely very exciting. I can't wait to see it myself, I got to tell you. So I just want to thank you so much on behalf of the audience. Personally, I mean, this has been a wonderful, wonderful step in an awesome direction on our healing journeys. Yeah, and I thank you. I truly thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. It really was an honor.